summer day in Efrat, and today's class is going to be, it says rotate device, but I will not. I know this trick. Today's class is going to be about Tu B'Av and about Parshas Ekev. So let's dive right in. We'll start with Tu B'Av. Okay, so Tu B'Av from the Hasidic perspective. Let's start with the Pshat. So a lot of beautiful things happen on Tu B'Av. The first thing is that the first thing I want to talk about is that Gemara says that there was no joyous day on the Jewish calendar like Chamisha Asar B'Av, the 15th of Av, and Simchas Beis HaShoeva. These are the most joyful days. It says there was no days as sad as Tisha B'Av, and no days as joyful on the Jewish calendar as Tu B'Av. So what was Tu B'Av? It's the 15th of Av. It's today. And how would they celebrate Tu B'Av? They would celebrate it by all single girls in the entire Jewish nation would all share each other's clothes, switch clothes, so no one would know who was wealthy, who had designer clothes, who didn't, and they would all wear white, go to the fields, and have a huge festival in the vineyards. They had this wine festival like we had last night. They would drink wine and dance in the vineyards, and any man who was looking for a wife would come towards them and choose himself a wife. They basically had like a big singles event, a huge festival where the men would come, speak to the women, and find their wife, and there was a time to find love. So it's a love day. It's a day to celebrate love, and I love that here in Israel, after like one year after living here, my husband and I happened to go on a date night, and we saw like every single couple in the world on a date night, and we realized that Tu B'Av is Valentine's Day in Israel,
yeah.
and it's so beautiful that everyone like celebrated by going out as couples here. So the why is it the most joyful day? What happened on Tu B'Av that makes it the most joyful day in the calendar? So a lot of things. There's actually 7 things that happened, joyful things that happened on Tu B'Av. I'll mention a few of them. So the historical things that happened are that the love connection ones are that the tribe of Benjamin was not allowed to marry, were excommunicated from marrying any other tribe after the horrible story of Pilagish Begiva, where they had like a mass rape of this concubine who ran away, and the whole tribe, a huge amount of men in Benjamin raped her. And she died, and so to punish them, they were excommunicated. And on Tu B'Av, a few years later, I don't know how many years, I meant to look it up, they were allowed to remarry into the tribe of Israel after, paying for their crimes. There's a lot of other punishments put on them. Also, we discussed that the daughters of Slavchad, after settling in Israel, their tribes had to marry within their tribes. Especially the women who got land from their fathers could only marry men from their own shevet, so that the land and their sons would inherit within their own tribes. And after a certain amount of years, they were permitted to marry within all the shvatim. So that was also a day to celebrate love. Now you can marry anyone you want. You're no longer limited to marrying within your tribe. So it was a very joyful day when everyone would come and celebrate and find any woman, not just limited. And so let's discuss some other ones. I forgot to print the notes. I'll pull it up over here.
It's interesting to say that because I know that on Pesach, when they talk about when we talk about the splitting of the sea, that the Shvatim had their own, own separate the way they went through. However, and they have their own mitzvot, and they have their own bigadim, and whatever they do, customs are different.
Yeah.
One thing that they did do was marry between the Shvatim.
Yeah, interesting.
Which was the beat. Oh,
Okay.
It doesn't look very healthy.
You're so brave.
Oh, go away. Oh, it doesn't look very.
A few more things happened. The dying of the generation of the Midbar ended on Tu B'Av. So the generation of the Midbar that was dying for the sin of the spies ended. Now also there was a lot of things that were about love and communication and togetherness. And also, so when Eretz Yisrael was divided into 2 kingdoms, Malchus Yehuda and Malchus Yisrael, there was a bad king, Yeravim ben Nevat, who made roadblocks so that his citizens couldn't go to the Lalot L'Regel, to Yerushalayim, for the Shalosh Regalim. And Hoshea ben Elah removed them 200 years later. Can you imagine? For 200 years, half of the Jewish people couldn't come to Yerushalayim for L'Regel L'Regel because there was roadblocks put up and they would be killed. And the new ruler, Hoshea ben Elah, removed these, so now they're all able to reunite. So again, there was a reunification. So there's a lot of reuniting happening on Tu B'Av. Another sad thing that was alleviated in Tu B'Av was that after the massacre in Beitar happened, in the Bar Kokhba rebellion, it was there were thousands and thousands of Jews cruelly massacred, and they weren't allowed to be buried. And the dead of Beitar were allowed to be buried on Tu B'Av in the year 3908. And the last thing that we're going to mention is really interesting. It's actually one that I don't know if I've ever heard. The breaking of the axe. They would celebrate by breaking their axes. Now, what was going on here? Every summer, when the Beis Hamikdash was in Yerushalayim, they would cut firewood the whole summer. And on Tu B'Av was the last day that they could chop firewood for the Beis Hamikdash. So everyone was involved in chopping firewood. Imagine how fun it was in the summer, like men, women going out chopping the wood, right? Breaking the wood, making piles. And on Tu B'Av was the last day. Why? Because Tu B'Av is when the summer days start to get shorter. The sun, the nights get longer, which is spiritually represents darkness getting longer, and sun, which represents revelation, gets shorter. And physically, they weren't able to cut more firewood because there wasn't enough sun to dry the firewood out to be able to use for the sacrifices in the Beis Hamikdash. So this was the last day you could cut firewood. And how do they celebrate it by? By the last day, they would break the axes and throw them out and like have bonfires rather than save it for the next year, which is very unusual, right?
Weird, yeah.
So they have this big celebration. So this whole festival, imagine they're breaking axes, they're chopping wood, they're dancing in the vineyards, they're drinking wine. It just sounds so beautiful and fun. Women trading clothing, men coming and dating in this like big giant like date festival, singles festival.
Why breaking the axes?
It was to symbolize that this like rejoicing that we're finishing this mitzvah of cutting wood for the Beis Hamikdash. The reason they broke it and not saved it, it's because like the idea of an axe is like very against the whole idea of what the Beis Hamikdash and spirituality stands for. Like an axe is like cutting wood. It says that you shouldn't even have like in the Beis Hamikdash, stone couldn't be like chopped. It had to be like made the way it was. So like cutting things was against the whole idea of the Beis Hamikdash. So the axes were like against that idea. So they broke the axes. They had to cut
So,
wood.
like, the only thing that they used,
Yeah, that was cut.
whatever,
Exactly.
is the firewood, and then they
Yeah.
broke the
Exactly.
axes. Okay.
Yeah, they use the fire and they break the axes. So it was a very joyful day. So spiritually, now I want to go a little bit deeper into like what is this idea, spiritually speaking, of why is this the love day that we celebrate as the day of love, the day of unity, and the day of this tremendous joyousness. So we actually look towards the moon and the sun in this day. And we learn in deeper dimensions of Torah that the sun represents the masculine, and every one of us is comprised of masculine and feminine. And the masculine is the stable. The sun rises and sets every single day, right? The sun rises in the same place, sets in the same place. It presents the same, that which is the same every day. Ein kol chodesh tachash hashemesh, right? That represents the masculine, the stable within us. And the feminine, the moon represents the feminine. And actually, Am Yisrael, we're not a stable nation. We rise and we wane. Just like the moon, it doesn't look the same every day. You never know what kind of moon you're going to see. I mean, you know, but every day it's different. You don't even know when it's going to appear in the new month, right? It's always up to question. There's always something new with the moon. It's getting larger and it's getting smaller. It's waxing and waning. It's not just stable, like the same thing every single day, right? That's that masculine tendency to do the same thing every single day. And the feminine quality is constantly changing. It's waxing and waning, as within the feminine emotions, right? We have our strengths. We have our times when we're fully outgoing and we're at our strongest, and we have times when we have to retreat inwards. We have times when our emotions are high. We have times when our emotions are low. With all of femininity, we have so much newness and so much changing. And the moon represents Chadash, Chodesh. The months go by the moon, and Chadash, as opposed to Shana, which goes by the sun, Shana is Yashan, it's old. It doesn't, and Chadash, which is the Chodesh, the months that go by the moon, is new. It's always constantly changing and fluctuating. And the moon, we specifically count the Jewish months by the moon, and the Jews are compared to the moon more than the sun, because as a Jewish nation, we're never the same. We're constantly going from being strongest, being like these, the strong, when King Shlomo was there, the Beis Hamikdash was at its greatest, Judaism was the greatest nation, to becoming annihilated, and then rising again, and then becoming annihilated. In the Purim story, we were celebrating our victory, and then we become smaller and greater. But we always know, the beauty is that we know that even when we're smaller, and even when we're not at our full strength, even when it feels like we're at the darkest time, we know that we're only very soon we're going to emerge again, and the moon's going to get fuller and fuller. So even at our darkest time, even when we don't see the moon, something beautiful is that if you look at night and you don't see the moon, and the moon's at a slither, the amazing thing is that the moon is still the exact same size. The moon hasn't changed. It's really only how it appears to us. And that's another thing that we really draw strength from, that you look at the moon and you feel like you're nothing. You feel like you're small and that you're nothing of yourself. But to know that you're the same, maybe it's how you feel or it's your appearance, but nothing has changed in the moon rather than our perspective of how much we can see of its strength. And it's there, it just has yet to emerge for other people to see it. Maybe it's the time for the moon to recharge, to move inwards and inside of itself, rather than going outwards. So that being said, knowing that in Judaism we count the years according to the sun and the months according to the moon, and knowing that the masculine is represented by the sun and the feminine is represented by the moon, the day to find love, the reunification. So let's talk about what love is now. Love, why is it so joyful? Why is it, there's nothing more powerful than that love between a husband and wife, than this day of finding, your love partner? We learn that it's not just a union of male and female, but finding love. It's actually a reunion of two souls that used to be one, two halves that were one, that were separated for so long. And that reunification of seeing one another again is this tremendous, powerful force that brings so much passion and so much love within it, that finding yourself again. So if it was just two people meeting one another and being like, oh, this is nice, that would be beautiful. But when it's two souls that were one, that were separated, and they find one another again, that's that joyfulness at the reunion. And we actually see that theme throughout a lot of the events that happened historically on Tu B'Av. There was a lot of reuniting. The reuniting of Binyamin with the rest of Am Yisrael, the reuniting of all the Shvatim that were separated, right? The reuniting of the King Malchus Yisrael with the Beis HaMikdash. There was so much reconnecting and reuniting. I even saw it with Axis, and I forget what it was. It was about, I blinked out. I'll see if I remember soon. So many of the events on Tu B'Av were about reuniting, and they represent a deeper, more cosmic level of the bride and groom. So just like a bride and groom, when they meet, that passion that exists is because their neshamas were longing for one another and searching for one another. That's why we're always searching. It's because their neshamas like, I remember that feeling and I want to find that again. I remember that other half that I saw, and I'm searching and searching for that. And that's why that search for your partner, for your other half, is so strong, and such a strong yearning to reunite, because you know what it was like and you miss it and you're yearning for that again. And similarly with the on the cosmic level, Hashem represents the masculine, the groom, and Am Yisrael represents the bride. And on Tisha B'Av, we for so many generations we were one with Hashem. We had that revelation and on Tisha B'Av that was taken away from us. And the reuniting, Tu B'Av represents the reunification that will happen after the separation, when we're still connected to Hashem, but we are pulled apart from one another. That presence that we had to reconnect with Hashem, to be one with the Shekhinah of Hashem, to celebrate and bask in that loving stage with Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash, was ripped apart in these 3 weeks beforehand. And we'll understand soon why Tu B'Av represents the reunification of us with Hashem, and where we get to that. So in every month we have a different shifting energy, and we spoke about that 2 weeks ago in the Shir on Av. On the energy of Av being this strong, the lioness, the fire, the sun, Av being ruled by the sun. Every month is ruled by a different planet, and Av is ruled by the sun. So it's a month of a lot of light, maybe even too much light. And when there's so much light, like the sun, it can either be beautiful and give us warmth and make things grow. But if there's too much sun, it can also cause sicknesses, disease. It can cause burning. It can cause sunburns. It can cause forest fires, and cause a lot of destruction. And the ultimate union. And if there's no sun, right, we can also lack of vitamin D, and lack of nothing will grow, nothing will flourish. So there's a very, in order for growth and connection to happen, we discussed that the sun has to be able to have a receiver, which is the moon. The moon is that which receives from the sun and reflects it back. For fire, light, passion to be helpful and connecting and not destructive, there needs to be a receiver. And we're getting the example of love. If somebody has so much love to give, that's amazing. But if there's no one to receive it, if the person doesn't want to receive it and the person wants to give so much love, that's assault, right? That's harassment. If someone is trying to love another person and the person's not physically responding, that could be rape, it could be assault, it could be harassment. But if there's someone to receive all that love, then that's the most beautiful love connection. So if there's that sun and there's a moon to receive it, that's the epitome of love and having the receiver, and having a receptor to it. And in general, another principle in Kabbalah is that the masculine is the giver, the mashpia, that gives, and the feminine represents the receiving, and that's the moon. So just like the sun is the masculine, which gives light, and the moon is the feminine, which receives. Even physically, in creating a child, the masculine is that which gives, and the female womb is that which receives and creates life. So we have to create life, to create connection. There has to be a giver, there has to be a receiver, there has to be that flow, that balance of flow of energy. There has to be the sun, there has to be the moon. And on Tu B'Av, we have this climax where the sun is at its strongest, because Av is the month of the sun, and the month of fire, the month of the lion. It's a fire sign as well. So there's so much light in Av, and then until Tu B'Av, in the first half of Av, the destruction could be spiritually connected to the idea that there's so much light, but there's nothing to receive it, because the moon is still small. So there's no receiver. So that light causes destruction. That energy and that light caused the base mikdash to be destroyed. It caused destruction over the years on Tisha B'Av. But now on Tu B'Av, when there's a full moon, when the moon is at its fullest and the sun is at its fullest, everything's aligned now. It's the only day of the year, really, that the sun, it's the day of the year that the sun is at its strongest and the moon is also full. So on the 15th day of the month, every day, just sign every day, every month, on the 15th day is when the Jewish calendar, is when the energies of the month are at their strongest. Like a Nisan, you see a Nisan, the day when freedom is the strongest is on the 15th day, and that's what Pesach is. The day that Tishrei, the love and connection in Tishrei is the highest, is on the 15th day, which is when we celebrate Sukkot. We celebrate that love and revelation of that love. And also in Av, the revelation of Av, in its most revealed state, happens on the 15th of the month when the moon is at its fullest. And now that we have a full moon to receive that love from the sun, there's that perfect space for connection to happen, for love to happen. So everything is aligned on this day for love and reconnection. When there's the sun, there's the light, and there's a keli, there's something to receive it. So it's not destructive, it's growth oriented. It brings light, it brings love, and it brings connection rather than destruction. So it's amazing how everything like spiritually connects and aligns like in every single capacity on this day. So it's like the day when you look at the moon and the full moon and you see the sun and you're like, oh wow, like everything fits in to here. We also have this other idea that we've spoken about in the class a couple of times about the circle and the line and the masculine and feminine. So the feminine again represents circular, similar to the moon. It goes ups and downs, and the masculine is more stable in a line, right? You know what you're going to get. It's moved in the same direction. Whereas the feminine, I'm not saying that men are all one way, women are all one way, because we're all made of both masculine and feminine. Everyone has different amounts. There could be the exact opposite, where in a relationship, the man is more of that feminine energy and the woman has more of the masculine energy, especially as we move towards Mashiach, where the energies of the moon where the moon and the sun used to be very, very different, where it said that like the sun was going to rule and the moon was going to be secondary. We learned that as Mashiach comes, the moon is going to be equal to the sun, right? There was a punishment for the moon, or not a punishment. It was initially there was Hashem made the moon and sun equal, which was the masculine and feminine. But the moon said, well, there has to be a giver and a receiver, right? The moon said there can't be two leaders. So Hashem said, okay, so you have to be the small one. We're going to do another class all on that. There's a long medrash about why, and Hashem appeasing the moon and apologizing to the moon. And for that sacrifice that the moon gives, there's a karban chatas given on Rosh Chodesh for Hashem's atonement for what he did to the moon, which is what happened to femininity, which is why for years the female was secondary. But now as we move towards Mashiach, there's a karban chatas given that Hashem brings for to atone for what he did for the moon's sacrifice. That moon has to be smaller, that the feminine, I think it's the Rosh Chodesh karban chatas, if I'm not mistaken. It says Hashem says, I'm going to bring a chatas, because it's at the end of the day, it was wrong, right? It's sad. We have to atone for that. But when Mashiach comes, we learn that the moon is going to again be equal to the sun. The moon is going to be as strong as the sun. So now, Rabbi Lubavitch Rebbe said many times, and now as we're moving towards the era of redemption, now we see that the feminine is rising. That's what we call it, the feminine rising. That we see so much that the feminine aspect, where the females are powerful again, where we're not feeling secondary as much, and where those lines are shifting, the lines are blurring a lot, where a lot of men will be more in touch with their feminine energy and a lot of women's masculine energy will come out. And that's why maybe like even in the gender crisis now, maybe that's the spiritual root for the gender crisis, because maybe people are misunderstanding this idea of like their femininity, right? We all have feminine and masculine. And in the chuppah I learned something so beautiful. The chuppah is all about that circular and linear energy. The chassan walks in a linear, the bride walks in a linear way, and then the chassan stands under the chuppah like a line, and the woman circles him 7 times, and then they both stand together as lines, because we're learning that it's not just the woman has to remain a circle and the man a line. They both have to embrace their strengths, but then also strengthen their weaknesses, so they can learn to understand one another. Because if you just say who you are, they'll be like clashing. But we have to be able to fuse the two. And after that, the chassan takes the ring, which is a circle, and the bride extends her finger, which is like the line, and they have that reversal of roles. They're saying, I'm going to embrace what you are, the feminine in me, and you're going to embrace the masculine, so we can become one. And then they get the ksuba, which is so cool. The ksuba is in the minhag is to roll it like a scroll, and they hand it to the kala. And the way the scroll represents that, if you look at it from standing up like this, it's a line, which represents the masculine, and it's the ultimate fusion of the two of them. When the scroll is like this, it's a line, and then when the scroll from the side, it's a circle, and it represents the spiral, that ultimate fusion of the line and the circle, and saying that that's what we need, that fusion of masculine and feminine. That's Tuba. It's the sun and the moon fusing and both at their strength, and that's why it's the perfect time when everything's aligned to find love, to be able to understand those deeper things. And if you can tap into that idea of the masculine and the feminine, right? The men going to the women are dancing, we're dancing in circles in the vineyards, and the men were coming towards them, right? So again, it's that linear energy going towards the circular energy, and that's where we have that like beautiful Tuba thing. So if anyone wants to go, we're going to end this class. Thank you so much for joining. And then if you're able to stay, we're going to do another, I'll just end this into another one on the Parsha. Thank you so much for joining. Happy Aliyah anniversary. Happy Tu B'Av. And I bless all of us to be able to experience both our masculine and feminine energies and the positive of both, to be able to make space to receive, so that the loving energy has a space to go, to be able to not just be a receiving space, but to be like a spiral, to grow in that circular energy, and to have love in all of our lives, to have true love that's like on Tu B'Av, that was for the essence of who we were and not just for the external. It was about finding love based on the deepest level of your soul. It was like a day like Yom Kippur, where your essence of your soul is revealed on that day, and they would find love not based, no one wore colors to distract. White represents the essence. They wore white and they switched clothes, so it was not about your status. There was no status involved. There was no color involved. It was just who you are at your core. And they would come out and see, like, without all the distractions of family, of status, of tribe, of anything, of colors, just who are you at your core. And then they would be able to connect into their neshama and feel who they're drawn to and pulled to, and look for their wife in that way. So yeah, it was such a beautiful day. So let us all be able to tap into that love the people in our lives in a way that we love them for who they are, not for what they accomplished, not for how they look on the outside. Tap into their neshama, or try to remember who their neshama is, and love their soul, and hopefully extend that love to ourselves as well. L'chaim and happy Tu B'Av.
Beautiful. Do they teach the sun and the moon for Kabbalah classes a lot? Because that's just so beautiful.
No.
The chuppah and all of that is like.
I wish. You know what?